Hey guys, there's a man I'm sure you know. His name is Mossab Hassan Youssef, and he has been nicknamed the Son of Hamas. He recently did a debate on Piers Morgan, and I wanted to break it down. The entire thing is unbelievable television, beautiful to watch. An Israeli advocate, a pro-Israel, former Hamas member, destroy these, anti-Israel activists for 50 minutes straight. So let's check it out, and I'll be pausing in between if I have something to say.
Well, Hassan Nasrallah, his hands are stained with blood, not only Jewish blood, but also Arab blood. He participated in the killing of hundreds of thousands of Syrians along the Russian forces and along Bashar al-Assad forces. This man has been or had been destabilizing the security of the Middle East. And this was the time to put an end for this bullying and this blackmailing and this act of terror.
I mean, Omar Badr, are you sorry that he's dead?
Piers, before I answer your question, I think there's something that your audience has to know about Mossab, who's on this program, if we can see if he's going to be able to control his temper and keep me from telling the audience this about him, is the fact that he calls every Muslim in the world untrustworthy, says you can't trust any Muslim, says everybody who identifies as Muslim is a predator, compares Muslims to animals, and the list goes on and on and on. And Piers, I think both of us know that if anybody engaged in that kind of bigotry to...
Okay, so this is just what they call an ad hominem argument, and he's not attacking the content of the debate. He's attacking the content of the other, his debater's character.
Or say, Jews, you would not give them airtime to appear on a program as if they're a real analyst who's here with something to say. And on top of these deeply big...
And that's completely wrong, because he gave time to Mohammed Hijab, who is incredibly anti-Israel, incredibly anti-Jewish, as well as Andrew Tate and many others. So Piers platforms pretty much anyone.
Good views that he holds. There's also the fact that he is simply just not a serious person, puts on this really dumb put-on angry face and barks incredibly shallow slogans about Israel being wonderful and its opponents being terrible and terrorists and so on. It's not really a real point of analysis. With that being at the forefront, I'll say that I think what Israel did in Lebanon and is doing is, don't take my word for it. Listen to what Israeli leaders themselves have said about the assassination of Nasrallah. They said they could have and wanted to reach a diplomatic agreement with Hassan Nasrallah, but his insistence on ending the genocide in Gaza as a precondition to them reaching a diplomatic solution led them to choose to assassinate him and killing hundreds of Lebanese civilians in the process, incinerating entire apartment buildings. So in essence, Israel is choosing to incinerate Lebanese civilians, to assassinate Nasrallah, because they don't want peace in Gaza. That is the dynamic that we have. And the fact that you can look at this and still not figure out what moral policy should be and who's to blame for this kind of path of escalation that we're on, to me is completely mind-boggling. It is obvious that Israel is out of...
Okay, so the problem with this argument is that he's tying Lebanon and Gaza. They have nothing to do with each other. The only thing they have to do with each other is Iran is funding both of them. At the end of the day, Lebanon doesn't give a shit about Gaza. Terrorists. There's no loyalty among thieves, as they say. The only reason that Lebanon is attacking Israel is because they hate Israel and because Iran is telling them to attack Israel.
Out of control. It's on a warpath.
All right, look, you've launched a substantive ad hominem attack on your other panelists, which is entirely your prerogative, and he can respond. But you also failed to answer my simple question. Are you sorry he's dead?
Mm-hmm. I look at it in terms of the impact on civilians, which in this case, I think his assassination has made things infinitely more dangerous. We're seeing this onslaught. So yes, this development.
Watch Mossab's face as he's just taking this in, because he just knows that he's going to be able to dismantle everything that this man says.
But Omar, that's not actually an answer to my question. Do you personally feel sorry that he is dead, the head of Hezbollah?
No, look, but that's the thing. I don't have individual personal feelings about players here. For me, what I'm concerned about is ultimately the impact.
Oh, you won't answer the question.
On innocent people. Absolutely. Look, Nasrallah, if you want me to talk about his legacy, that's a really easy thing to do. He was a hero throughout the entire Arab world for having driven Israel out of South Lebanon in 2000, for delivering Israel its first defeat in 2006. And then his record, had a major blemish on it when he intervened in the Syrian civil war for geopolitical reasons on the side of the government. And that upset a lot of Syrians who are essentially repressed and brutalized by the Syrian government, to see that he has intervened in order to help them maintain power. But that was more a geopolitical decision more than it is a moral decision. And so he has a mixed record, and a lot of people like him and a lot of people don't. But ultimately, there's no question about the fact that he is a major figure.
Imagine talking about a terrorist, someone that kills and murders innocents, as having a mixed record. Imagine saying that Adolf Hitler had a mixed record. Unbelievable.
In the region that has a significant fan base, not just within Lebanon, but throughout the entire region. And that taking this major escalatory step, when we've had the alternative, we've had the option of a ceasefire, and Israel chose not to take that and chose the path of escalation, and taking out a major figure is obviously pushing us towards further catastrophe. And it's materializing right now in Lebanon as we're watching Israeli terrorism decimate the civilian population in all parts of Lebanon, and that's a really, really dangerous escalation.
Okay, Mossab, first of all, your response to the personal attack that was launched on you at the start of that.
I'm not going to comment on that. I know who I am. I know what I am. I'm not a commentator on the Middle Eastern
conflict. By your own admission.
I lived the conflict. I witnessed. I'm an eyewitness. I lived half of my life in what's so-called Palestinian society, and I spent the other half of my life with the Jewish community. When I speak on the authority of experience that is representing both cultures. One culture is a culture of death that has been sacrificing children for political and financial gain. And Omar is coming here to the West, carrying the false Palestinian identity, hiding behind a couple of Western values, trying to manipulate and deceive American and Western audience by showing somebody like Hassan Nasrallah and Ayatollah and Sinwar and the rest of the proxy leaders. These people are reckless. They started the war on October 7, and Israel had the right to defend itself. And Hezbollah has been launching missiles on civilians. They just killed 12 children as the whole world is watching on a playground. And that was Druze community, which is a great part of the Lebanese community. And no one leashed Hassan Nasrallah. How many times Omar and Mustafa's and Muhammad's complained or protested against Hezbollah aggression, taking advantage of Israel bleeding in the south?
I'm sorry.
And he was totally mistaken.
And
Hassan Nasrallah today, this is his punishment. Israel is legitimate when I stand for Israel. Why do I stand for Israel? Because Israel is the most legitimate ethnic group in the region, with evidence, overwhelming evidence to relationship to that land.
Yeah.
Omar and the Muslims have been trying for the past 1400 years to delegitimize and annihilate the Jewish people from that land. And they hate it so much that Israel is showing resilience and strength. You ask Omar if he's sad. Omar is mourning. Hassan Nasrallah is his hero. So let me tell Omar and his likes, listen, you cannot rewrite history. And when I speak, I don't only speak on my own authority, I speak on the authority of the universe, that Iran and all its proxies and the Muslim world behind it.
No, this is a very, very serious conversation.
Back off. There is going to be only the language of fire. And you can sit here in the West pretending to value the Western ethics.
All right.
You are a liar with a false identity and your religion.
All right.
And your entire population.
Let me get a
have
time.
no respect.
Let me call a timeout here. Omar, you can respond to this. I'm going to just go to the Professor Moradi for a moment to get his response to this. I will come back to you. What I would say, though, is you did choose to start the whole debate with a quite lengthy personal attack on Mossab. It's hardly surprising he would return the favor.
Merited.
I personally would prefer.
That's the difference, Piers.
I'd like all the guests to try and talk about the issues.
Openly bigoted. No, there's a difference between me pointing out the fact that
This guy is such a he's probably gay. The way he, his voice is like, it's a gay voice. He sounds like a wokey, and he's supporting a terrorist regime. This is what we say when we mean that the West is basically filled with useful idiots. You have idiots like this calling him a bigot, calling Mossab Hassan Youssef a bigot, when the people that he supports, a guy like Hassan Nasrallah, literally says, well, gay people, we want to, just kill them all. They have to be killed in the first instance. You can't do anything with them. And this guy's probably gay. So he's part of the Queers for Palestine crowd. He's part of the useful idiots crowd.
he openly says that all Muslims are evil. And
All right, I'm just gonna skip ahead. By the way, this video is recorded after the attack, the Iranian attack on Israel, and right now, Israel is looking to respond.
comparison to animals and engages in
They were all destroyed, atrocity on
All right, this
And
is boring.
the north
boring,
of your border. Why is Iran not?
boring,
the pager.
It's interesting that you phrase it
See,
boring,
they've been giving them intelligence
the Daily Mirror news
side in Yemen
boring,
criminal regime.
is your hero.
boring.
Look, the Islamic Revolution leaders, Ayatollah.
Hold on, I'm just gonna go back to the beginning of this part where he goes back to Mossab. Hold
He's
on.
your hero. To me, he was a despicable terrorist, but we will have to leave it there. Professor Morandi, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, let's go back to the panel. I mean, Mossab, that is the Iranian view. He's entitled to have that view. It's interesting for my viewers, I think, to hear that view. But what is your response?
Look, the Islamic Revolution leaders, Ayatollah, and before him, Ruh Allah, they have invested some 40 to 50 years into their proxies. And that includes Hezbollah, Hamas, and other proxies in the region. Now, what they see the collapse of their aggression, the collapse and the failure of many, many years of investment. What happened to Hezbollah is shocking to the core. The entire Islamists around the world are seeing the collapse of one of the most funded, equipped military force in the Middle East. And Ayatollah is not far from Israel's reach. He understands this. This is why he retreated after the assassination of Haniyeh. And by the way, I want to ask just a question.
And right now, after striking Israel, he's down underground, trying to avoid getting assassinated.
Okay, who killed the Iranian president to begin with? The fact that Israel did not announce that did not mean that Israel does not have any hands in it. So Ayatollah and the other Hamas leaders in Qatar who think that they are immune to retaliation.
He's referring to the helicopter crash that killed Ibrahim Raisi. He's indicating that Israel had a big part in that, and it wasn't exactly as it seemed, just an innocent helicopter crash. Potentially, Mossad was involved.
They're totally mistaken. I said this from day one, and that's based on a personal experience with the Israeli intelligence of more than 10 years, that all Hamas leaders will be eliminated with no exception. Hezbollah, that was surprising to me how fast they actually collapsed. But the Iranian regime is a lot more vulnerable. And the Iranian nuclear program is ought to be destroyed. It's just a matter of time. There is no immunity for these people who have been destabilizing the region, taking advantage of the chaos they create. Then we have the clowns here, what so-called experts coming here in the West, spreading false narrative of occupation and Palestine. And what I say, Palestine never existed except as a colonial entity created by the Brits, lived for about 25 years, a colonial entity. It was never a country. It was never a nation. And today, when Omar and his friends come and say Israel is occupied.
Yeah, and he has a great point here. I think that what people don't understand. They use Palestine as a way to clean up for their crimes. They use so they commit October 7th. Hamas, yeah, let's kill them. We'll stream it live. We'll show how we destroy the Jews. We'll beat them up, right? And then 5 minutes later, oh, Palestinians are suffering. So you go from, it was at 180 in a day. 180 in a day. The flag they use when they kill Jews and they kill, and they oppress people, whatever, is the, Hamas flag, is the Hezbollah flag, is Iranian, whatever Republic flag, Islamic Republic of Iran, and the Houthis, and then the flag that they use, all of them, the flag that they use when they need to cover up for their crimes is the Palestinian flag, is the Palestinian people suffering. So they all use this one scapegoat, the Palestinians, as a way to get out of their crimes. And he points it out very well. It's almost like the Jewish people, but in reverse.
Force. I say, occupy in what? If Palestine never existed, how can you occupy something that never existed?
Okay, let me bring in.
So now they keep on. No, wait.
I've got to let Omar
Now
respond.
they keep going. They keep. He will have his time. He will have his time.
Right
Now
He's
talking about a false
occupation being
narrative.
fake and
We
Israel
are
not really
talking
Hang on,
about
don't
a
talk
false
over each other.
narrative.
Musab, you've had a chance to have your diatribe.
Okay, Omar, you respond now.
You're hearing Musab here talking about how occupation is all fake and made up and it's whatever. But it's incredible that when you look at what international law says, what the UN says, what the UN General Assembly says, what UN resolutions say in the
Okay, everyone knows that the UN is a complete joke. Antonio Guterres, right after Iran attacked Israel today, he said, and I quote, "I condemn the escalation." Oh, the escalation. Oh, he condemns the escalation. What he failed to mention was that Iran launched 180 ballistic missiles at Israel. It's just he condemns the general escalation because he doesn't want to condemn Iran, because Iran are the ones that pay him.
the Security Council, there is a complete and total consensus on the fact that Israel is an occupying power, illegally occupying the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. The International Court of Justice has come out with an opinion making clear that this occupation is illegal and has to end. So while Musab wants to pretend that this is something that Palestinians manufactured because he has nothing of substance really to say, the reality is just so obvious and so blatant that you don't even know how to address such a bizarre and ridiculous argument that this is something that Palestinians invented. Palestinians have been there for literally thousands of years. They are the natural continuation of people who have lived in that land for a very, very long time. And yes, it's true, Palestine was never an independent UN member, for example, as an independent country. But by the same token, Native Americans in the United States were never also did not have a state that is a member of the United Nations.
Again, watch Musab's face as he's taking this information in. He just loves it. He loves this stuff.
It doesn't change the fact that they were living on their own land and that colonists came and take over and drove them off of that land and created a new state on top of them. So Israel was created at the expense of Palestinians. And while you might talk about this militant group or that militant group or what their charter may say about the destruction of Israel, in the case of Israel, it is active policy that we're watching is to destroy Palestine. This isn't theoretical. We're not talking about what their charter says. We're talking about what Israel's doing. And Israel is committing
The difference is Palestine never existed.
genocide in Gaza. It is building illegal settlements in the West Bank, using unspeakable levels of violence against the Palestinian civilians there, and confining them to smaller and smaller areas.
Today, a massive attack in two terrorists from Hebron actually attacked a train in Jaffa, and they killed 6 Israelis, possibly even more, wounded many others. And so, listen, yeah, there's going to be, there's going to be settler violence in the West Bank if there are terrorists committing terror acts all across the country. There are going to be Jews that fight back.
We are watching the destruction of Palestine before our eyes in a way that the entire international human rights community and international law says is completely illegitimate and criminal. And our reaction is to fund it and maybe occasionally criticize it instead of standing up to it in a really meaningful
And Omar,
sense.
what would
that's
you,
the double standard
Omar,
here.
what should Israel have done on October the 8th after the attack the day before?
In a theoretical world in which I was the
The one question they can't answer. What would you do if you were prime minister on October 8th, None of them answer it correctly, or even attempt a relatively reasonable answer. Most of them just say, "Oh, end the occupation." But let's see what he has to say.
The Israeli leader on October 8th. What I would do is take on the podium, acknowledge the fact that we've created an unspeakable situation in which violence is inevitable, and I would offer to instantly end the occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, to apply international law and respect Palestinian human rights in exchange for every person on October 7th who engaged in acts of violence against Israeli civilians to be brought before court and put on trial for
Does he think that Hamas and like Iran are like these, just reasonable people that you can just bring to court? Oh, just come to court with us and, give us all the people that killed all our, people on October 7th. They look at those people as heroes. They don't look at them as criminals. They told them to do that. Like, this guy is so delusional. Oh yeah, I'll end the occupation, and then doesn't he realize the next day, the exact next day after he ends the occupation, there will be an uprising and there will be the end of the Jewish state. The end of the Jewish state. This guy is like so fucking delusional.
war crimes.
And who
I
would
think
do,
that
and
would
who
solve
would
the
do, who
entire
would do
problem.
that?
But that's out of the
Who
question.
would have brought
Exactly.
40,000 Hamas fighters to court?
Yeah, you don't need the entire 40,000 in the same sense that you don't need every last member of the Israeli military to be brought before war crimes because the Israeli military engages in war crimes. There is a path forward, and that's the thing. The reason
But you're
why
seriously
this is really out of
suggesting that
question
Israel should not have
is because
responded.
Israel insists.
But you're seriously suggesting that Israel should not have responded to one of the worst terror attacks in history in any military way whatsoever.
You have to be consistent about this, Piers. If we're expecting Palestinians to not respond in any militant sense to literally decades of Israeli atrocities and war crimes against Palestinians, why does it only work one way? Why do we say that Israel must?
Well, every single one of those atrocities have been started by Palestinian aggression towards Israel. Every single time. Arabs attack, then Israel wins because Israel always wins, and then Arabs cry, and then they attack again. That's the cycle. Cry, lose, start a war, cry, start a war, lose, cry, start a war. Start a war, lose, cry, start a war, and the cycle of violence continues until Israel has a decisive victory and finishes them to the end. Meaning, not necessarily, obviously, chas v'shalom, God forbid, no genocide, but showing a defiant win so they can't even contemplate attacking again, So that could be in the form of annexing the West Bank, annexing Gaza, taking over, taking land, because they'll think twice about attacking again when you inflict not punishment that goes away after a few days. They don't really care about their people, but land and other things that are have further implications towards the future that they actually value.
Respond militarily, but Palestinians are never said to need to respond militarily to decades of Israeli occupation and war crimes. Why is that double standard there?
Because the argument, as you know, from the other side is if you go back to 1948, that there have been a series of escalations in those 75 years with blame being attached to both sides, small things happening, which then trigger outbreaks of war. And it's gone on now for 75 years. And at the center of it is an ongoing, but here's my point. The center of it is an ongoing dispute about territory and land. I get all that. But ultimately, you cannot have a situation where on one day, that volume of people are massacred and wounded, in 7,000 people wounded, and that Israel just does nothing. It was so far and away beyond anything anyone had seen in that conflict for 75 years in one day. Of course they were going to respond. Of course Hamas knew. Of course Hamas knew that would be what Israel would do. So they knew what would happen to their own people, and they didn't care. Iran knew what the response would be, and obviously knew what Hamas were going to do. Hezbollah.
The best part of watching Piers Morgan is seeing him find moral clarity when he's talking to the Palestinian people, to the Palestinian, So he'll go, if he's arguing with an Israeli, he'll take devil's advocate. If he's arguing with a Palestinian guy, he'll take devil's advocate, and he's always, just going the other way. What do you guys think about Piers Morgan? Let me know in the comments. I actually want to know what your opinion is of him. I think he's okay, but I wouldn't love it if I would actually love it if he would stop doing these debates. but he benefits off it. I think that's why he does it. I think he's just trying to garner attention and views, which makes him money, which I don't have a problem with. I'm a capitalist. I think it's fine. But it would be great if he could stop making money off the pain and suffering of the Jewish people.
His reaction was not to show a modicum of sympathy for any of the people killed. It was to launch a barrage of rockets in sympathy with Hamas, the terrorists who perpetrated it. And they've carried on doing that year, for a whole year. And they've displaced 65, 70,000 Israelis from the north of Israel. And at some point, of course, Israel is going to respond. Now, what part of what I've just said is factually inaccurate?
Yeah, I think the entire framing that Israel is responding is at the fundamental core of what's wrong.
I'm not denying historical. The reason I prefaced it by saying,
not historical.
I said there have been 75 years of flare-ups and wars and everything, and you can argue about all the history as long as you want. What you can't argue with is the scale of what happened on October the 7th was so horrific. It was always going to get a
there's no
massive
denying
response.
it was a major attack.
Sorry?
Yeah. No, here's the thing, Piers. This is not about tracing it back as a tit for tat. Well, they did this before and those people did this before. There is a status quo. It's not equal sides that are living on both sides of a border that are perfectly living fine and equal, and then one of them chooses to launch an attack against the other. You have a fundamental status quo in which one people rules another, in which Israelis every day,
Israel left the Gaza Strip in 2005.
Decade after decade, are free and live in complete freedom and democracy and so on. And you have Palestinians in Gaza who are living in a cage, not allowed to go in and out.
Free Gaza from Hamas.
Have no freedom,
but Hamas
have no
were
economy,
given governmental
have no airport,
power. Yeah, but hang
have
on.
no prospect for a
Hamas
better
was
future.
given governmental power from 2005, and all it did was spend billions of dollars building a huge underground tunnel network so it could continue to wage terror against Israel. They squandered that money. I mean, you can argue till the cows come home, but that's obviously what they did, and they did it at the expense of their people. So yeah, you can claim with great cause, by the way, that Israel's had an occupation which should never have been permitted in the first place. But you can also not deny that in 2005 they pulled out of Gaza and let Hamas take charge, and this is where we've got to. How has that helped the people?
No, I don't think that's a correct framing. No, they withdrew.
he's just filibustering. He can't answer.
In 2005 out of Gaza and then put Gaza under siege and made it a cage and allowed Hamas to govern this cage internally. They can be the prison wardens of Palestinian prisoners. That's not meaningful governance. And then you can have a serious debate about how Hamas spent its money. You can say that maybe what they should have done is make this cage a little bit more.
What they have to answer back is they have another cage, which is Egypt's border. A. B. They could have turned Gaza into an incredible oasis, but instead they used the billions and billions of dollars in foreign aid to just build tunnels.
Pleasant for Palestinians to live in, and instead they chose to devote their resources into breaking out of that cage by investing in military infrastructure. I'm not a fan of Hamas. I don't support them. I oppose their rule. I don't think they're a particularly positive influence on Palestinian society. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about a captive population that Israel has just put in a cage and left to rot, it is natural that people are going to be drawn to more extremist and violent.
So he doesn't condemn Hamas, but he doesn't support Hamas, but essentially he doesn't condemn Hamas. It's natural, he says. So it's natural to burn babies alive. Okay, makes sense. Reasonable.
Ideologies in order to break to that fundamental injustice.
But do you accept, though? But do you accept
that's really the reality?
Do you accept that you have the three H's, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, all prescribed terror groups to many nations around the world, all of them funded and resourced by Iran? And do you accept that at some point, when you have that kind of concentrated collection of groups that are wedded to the destruction of Israel, Israel is going to do what it can to try and save itself, right? You can argue about the history as much as you want, but they're going to do that. And what is inarguable, it seems to me right now, what I put to Professor Morandi, is that from a pure military perspective, it would appear that Israel is having enormous success now in taking on Hamas, Hezbollah, now the Houthis, and Iran has disappeared. Iran is doing nothing to defend these groups that it's funded for so long. Now, maybe they will. But at the moment, it looks like either they don't have the ability to properly get involved or they don't have the will. And that could be an enormous transformative revelation for that whole region, couldn't it?
Yeah, two things on what you just said, Piers. I think the fundamental reality is that Israel is insisting on a situation of dominance. Again, this is not a status quo in which Israel is just another country in the region.
Okay, this guy is so boring. He just keeps on with the same Israel dominance. Shut up. Let's go to the next thing. Hold on, I'm just skipping to where Mossab intervenes at some point. He should have one other segment here, possibly towards the end. There we go.
Where is this all going to end?
Well, the eyes are not only on Lebanon. The most important target and the priority number one is the Iranian nuclear program. This is priority number one. We cannot afford allowing any Islamic entity to have mass destruction weapon because they are not showing responsibility. They have been bullying, they have been intimidating other religions and ethnic groups. The Islamic hatred against the Jewish people is evident. And of course, many people can hide behind the Palestine as a device to express their anti-Semitism, to inflict pain on the Jewish people after they suffered a genocide on October 7, which, by the way, by the definition, the only genocide was committed is on October 7. What's happening in Gaza is not a genocide, it's collateral damage. It's the use of human shields that has been justified by Omar and many advocates on behalf of Palestine who think that the use of human shields and kidnapping people and raping and looting and the calls for annihilating of the human race is a
disgusting
form
accusation.
of resistance.
That's completely baseless. I've never
This is
justified
that
any of these
you
things.
shut up.
Well, you actually just said 5 minutes ago. It's natural for Hamas to rise up. Natural.
You shut up. It's my turn now.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
now,
by all means, yeah.
the thing
Unhinged.
is,
Go on with your
they
unhinged rambling. Go for
they
it.
invert the narrative. They invert the narrative. Every time they suffer a defeat, they call it a genocide. And we say, no, there is a big difference between defeat and a genocide. You started this war and you killed Jewish people on October 7 by the name of Allah, not by the name of Palestine. Then the entire Muslim world backed Hamas in a global offensive against the Jewish people, a small minority that is resilient to time, with overwhelming evidence in relationship to the land, the only indigenous people to the land who did not oppose allowing the Arabs to stay in the state of Israel. This is why we have 2 million Arabs in Israel. So now, to accuse Israel
that's
of
ridiculous.
ethnic cleansing,
Israel was
to
established by
accuse
ethnically
Israel of
cleansing
genocide,
Palestinians. That's how
while
they
you
became
are
a
the
Jewish state.
perpetrator. You are the perpetrator. Why are you interrupting me? I listened to your false narrative all the way until the end.
No.
So
Go
this
ahead.
is the time to sit down and listen.
Carry on.
Sit
No,
down
you're right.
and listen.
Carry on with your nonsense.
This
Go
is
ahead.
your mastery, inverting the narrative. This is what you do best. You are the perpetrator, then suddenly you become the victim. And I tell you something, Iran will be punished. Everyone who's standing behind terrorism, Hamas is a terrorist organization designated as a terrorist organization in the United States. You cannot be American and supportive of Hamas. You say you are not a big fan of Hamas, but you are a big fan of Hassan Nasrallah. Hassan Nasrallah killed many Americans, hundreds of Americans. Hassan Nasrallah is a criminal, Ayatollah is a criminal, and whether you come by the name of Allah or by the name of religion, it doesn't matter. Justice must be delivered. What happened on October 7, it's not about how many Jews were killed. We cannot agree to that. Nobody in the free world would agree on Hamas aggression that was documented by their own cameras. And of course, we will have to go after them. Otherwise, if I to listen to you, earth will be corrupted. If I to just follow your logic that uh,
Do you hear
the war
yourself?
started
Honestly, Mossab, do you
before,
believe
in
anything that you're saying, or do you
1948.
just vomit nonsense
The war
nonstop?
started 1400 years ago. Your mosque in Jerusalem is built on the top of the Jewish temple. You go below the mosque and we have all the evidence. You don't have the right to delegitimize Israel as a nation. It's against facts. It's against the Bible. It's against history. You cannot rewrite the history by
Okay,
keep
wonderful.
inverting
Yes.
and
Great
spreading
slogan.
false narrative.
Okay, listen, I want
This,
to. Okay,
this is you're
Yeah.
going nowhere.
All right,
Israel
Mossab,
is
thank
going
you.
nowhere.
Okay,
And you need to have the legitimacy first.
Okay.
Okay, you must have the
Thank you, Mossab.
legitimacy as a
All right,
Palestinian.
all right,
You need
Omar,
to prove
finally,
to the
and very
world that
quickly,
you are
'cause
legitimate
I've got
first
to wrap this up, guys.
before you
I'm going to wrap
try
this
to
up.
delegitimize
I just want to
Israel.
ask Omar the same question I asked Mossab, which is,
Okay, so there's gonna be nothing interesting here. I gotta say, Mossab Hassan Youssef, the reason why I love him so much compared to other advocates, and there are a lot of great people advocating for Israel, is because not only, his firsthand experience and all this other stuff, it's because he gets to the root of the conflict much, much better than a lot of these other advocates. A lot of these people will talk about, they'll give the Hasbara talking points, human shields, whatever, and he does some of that. He does do some of that. But then he talks about Allah, and he talks about, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and he talks about the Muslims, and he talks about how Islam itself is a replacement theology over Judaism, and how it's all connected, it's a much deeper conflict than people understand. It's not Israel Palestine, it's Jews and Muslims. It's Judaism and Islam, and it's very, very deep rooted in their societies, and that's why this conflict will only end when one victors over the other. For more, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to help us make more of these debate videos and in general support our work, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored. And I would also encourage you to join the channel memberships, which we just launched recently, which is very exciting. And we'll be bringing you a lot of extra content there as well. And pray for Israel as they just dealt with Iran's attack and are figuring out what to do as a counterattack.